Jimmy says the way to get 100 million views is to get 100 million people to click. Yeah, it's a little harder for the rest of us, right? But there's a clear pattern among the thumbnails of the biggest YouTubers today. Let's break that down. Getting the click for bigger YouTubers comes down to a few key thumbnail principles: art, focus, and story. But each of these is multifaceted. Let's break them down into practical things that you can apply to your thumbnails today. Part of the problem I see when working with creators on their thumbnails is what I like to call the art side. As a side hustle, I'm an artist. You're going to get an artist perspective here today. It begins with knowing who your target audience for your content is. High energy content, that entertains the viewer. That demands bright colors, hyper-realistic images, much like kids' content. If you're educating adults on, say, productivity, however, then your vibe is going to be a little bit more on the subdued and calming side. But just because you're leaning into a more calming vibe, one thing you'll notice, all niches have well-lit faces with brightness punched up a bit. You want the viewer to be able to see what's going on. Another pattern, regardless of vibe, is contrast. Contrast helps deliver tension and allows those thumbnails to really pop, calm or energetic. One thing you'll notice the deeper we get into these main key principles is that color and lighting isn't the only pattern. After the art side of it, there are several elements to pay attention to when it comes to focus. A common mistake is scale and lack of focal point. What good is having a person on the thumbnail if we can't see what's going on in the face? If the scale is off, the viewer is just going to have to pass that thumbnail by. It'll fade into the background with the rest of the noise on the homepage. But when you scale people and things larger, I can land on the whites of the eyes or see exactly what is going on there, emotions, and it makes me curious. Charisma on Command nails this over and over again. If the people were smaller, I would completely miss the story. Scale and focal point also applies to things. Let's couple that together with composition and rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is a type of composition where an image is divided evenly into thirds, both horizontally and vertically, and the subject of the image is placed at the intersection of those dividing lines, or along one of the lines itself. This generally leads to compelling and well-composed shots. Scott from Driver61 makes some of the best focused thumbnails. Notice the scale of what's going on, and if it's something small that we need to know about, he points us right to it, or we might miss the key context that starts to create intrigue and tension in my brain. Sometimes he'll even create a circle around it, or other creators will magnify what's going on in the circle. It becomes a clear focal point. But the key here is to strip away everything else. Remove the noise. If you have noise, you can't land on what's important, and then there's no focal point. This is a great example here. The tire is on a car, clearly, but the car is pushed so far into the background and blurred out, I see the wrinkles on the tire, and that's it. My brain is starting to ask, what's going on? What's happening? Pairing it with the text, why so soft, gets me to stop the scroll and read the title. Me and 11 million other people. Matt D'Avella is another creator that is so great at focus. He gives you just enough information, and if there's noise, he'll knock it so far back that you can focus only on what's important. His emotions in his faces and that donut or cold shower, yeah, it's very clear. I need to be able to see what's going on. Don't make me work hard to figure it out. The best creators have 2 to 3 things max going on in a thumbnail. Any more and the noise leads to confusion. And Donald Miller says, if you confuse, you lose. Keep it simple, but focus and art aren't going to do the trick alone. Thumbnails need to be able to visually tell the story. A good exercise is to do this first before allowing yourself to use any text. If you can't visually tell the story first, you don't have it. But if you need text to provide intriguing context, intriguing being the key word here, use a simple font and add 2 to 4 words. 2 is better, but 4 at the max. Something that I wouldn't be able to figure out on my own. Utilize drop shadow, add color when necessary. Remember, the smaller those thumbnails get in the suggested feed, if I can't read it, it's noise. If your video is about a thing, give us a close-up shot that creates intrigue. But if you're on the thumbnail itself, give us a story tapping into emotions. Dr. Mike, Mr. Beast, Matt D'Avella, they do this so well. They do not need text in order for me to understand what the video is about. Jimmy Donaldson is the master when it comes to visual storytelling. Pay attention to all the things we've talked about so far because they're all present in his thumbnails. But one of the things he does so well is visually give you information rather than putting it in text. He doesn't need to say, leave your job for $100K in the thumbnail. He hands several stacks of cash to an employee, tempting them, if you will, wearing a McDonald's shirt. That visual M, it tells the story on its own. Notice the scale, the composition of the story. He knocked back the kitchen. It was well lit. There's an emotional face on the employee. But when he's being hunted by the FBI, he looks genuinely distraught at being caught. Notice how the FBI guy is looking directly at Jimmy, who is looking emotionally at me. There's context for the story also on a smaller scale and slightly being knocked back into the background. There's a reason he has 100 million subscribers. His videos, they get 100+ million people to click. But what about you? This lesson can also be applied in a much simpler way. To set yourself apart, you need to do something interesting, something visual that someone is going to easily see and be intrigued by. Let's take a look at Ryan Trahan's recent 30-day penny series. This was one of the biggest things on YouTube a few months ago, and it garnered him 2+ million new subscribers in 30 days. This series was shot and uploaded in real time. 30 days to cross the US. He did it with 2 members on his team, one to hold the camera while he created the content and another who was editing. But something they did not have time for on the road was thumbnail creation. The dilemma they faced was knowing just how important thumbnails are to the success of a video. For this very reason, they shot and created all 30 thumbnails ahead of the challenge. This gave them the opportunity to find the stories that fit those thumbnails. All check off all the boxes we have been talking about in these 3 key principles: art, focus, and story. My point is it's about getting a little uncomfortable, because comfortable clearly isn't working for you. Your channel isn't fragile. You can't break it. If you aren't getting the click, doing the same thing over and over isn't going to get you different results. If it's permission you need to experiment, you got it. Effective thumbnails, they're going to get the viewer to stop scrolling long enough to read the title. But the thing is, thumbnails and titles, they work together. When you create true curiosity or tension in my brain, it makes me feel something. And that tension, I now need to resolve. And the only way that's going to happen is with the click. But on days when titles are just hard, in this video, here we have some go-to ways for you to approach coming up with clickable titles. I'll see you there.